Our panel of break-fix petrolheads are back for another rousing "What should I buy?" debate. Using unique shopping criteria, they are challenged to find our first-time collector the best vehicle that will make their friends go, "Where do you get that?" or "What the hell is wrong with you?" at the next Cars and Coffee. For every 4 out of 5 petrol heads surveyed, when asked, "What car should I buy?" the answer is always Miata. Many folks would argue that the Mazda MX-5, known to many of us as the Miata, is a great option for a number of reasons. It's well made, efficient, and is surprisingly affordable. Some would say the Miata is one of the most popular roadsters of all time, beating out all the British cars that inspired it, and it's a formula that has worked for years. With others trying to imitate, but never quite capturing the magic created by Miata, is that true? Is there more to the Miata mystique than meets the eye? What's it really like to be a Miata owner?
That's right, Brad. In our first ever double crossover episode, we aim to answer those questions and more as we chat with returning guest and drive-through news sponsor Dave Peters from HPDEJunkie.com, along with Jim Tramontano, founder of No Money Motorsports blog, as well as their friend Bill Snow, founder of the Late to Grid podcast. Welcome to Break Fix, gentlemen. How about we get into it?
Thanks for having us.
Hey, thanks.
So this is like podcast inception. It's a podcast within a podcast within a podcast.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm going to start off with, we talked about the answer is always Miata. I'm wearing this t-shirt from Blip Shift, which I love, that says the original answer is Lotus Elan. Many will say the Miata was born in California, built in Japan. We actually had somebody on the show not long ago that was on the original design team for the Miata, and that was a super interesting story and whatnot. But we talked with him about its British inspiration, and he said, oh, well, it's really a combination of cars. They stole from Alfa, they stole from Lotus, they stole from here, they stole from there. So let's talk about how each of you came into the world of Miata and briefly give your motorsports bio, talk about what you do and things like that. So why don't we start with Jim from No Money Motorsports?
All right. Hey, so I'm one of those people that 15 years ago, you would have never guessed I'd be in a Miata. I grew up in a muscle car household. We had Mopars, Chargers, and Challengers in my house. And I had a muscle car, and then I got a Mustang. Almost got kicked out of my family for it. I had it and started motorsports with that. I started autocross. And then one of my buddies bought a Miata, and he's like, you just have to drive it, man. Like, just try it out, drive it. Got in the car, drove it, and within like 2 or 3 miles was like, all right, the Mustang is for sale. And that's really how I got a Miata. Ended up buying that exact car from him because he found another one he wanted to upgrade into. That's really how the Miata thing started.
What year Mustang?
I had 2 at first. So I got a 95, started autocrossing in that. But yeah, last year, the 5.0, sold that for an 05, which is the first year of the retro body style.
Yeah. So, okay, so I'm not surprised you got rid of those for the Miata.
Oh, I don't know. I miss them both, though, so much. I don't regret selling them one bit, but I miss them every day.
Yeah. I'm there with some of my cars, too.
200 horsepower of 5 liters of awesome. Yeah, that's
215.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you must have the GT model.
One of the times right before I decided to sell it, I was at a stoplight, 2-lane road, no one in sight except for right behind me was a minivan. And I just I took off from that light as hard as I could, second gear, and I'm halfway through second gear, and I look in my mirror and the van is right on my bumper. It's like, oh, this isn't going to work. From there, just started track days where I had been autocrossing to that point, and then basically jumped right into track days with the Miata. I started doing volunteering and working with NASA, doing a lot of days with them. Really, just as time went on, then I started instructing, then I started time trial, and then I started racing. It's just kind of the way the cookie crumbled there. And through all that, I got into doing track days like right out of college, basically. So I had absolute mountain of student loans and a teaching job that paid a lot less than my student loans, we'll say. So I started this whole thing on an extreme budget. With the Miata, I was living in apartments. I was working on it in the apartment parking lot and all these things. And with that, I got a lot of kind of strategies and tips to really do it on the cheap and do it easily. That is where my whole No Money Motorsports thing came out, because people kind of could see that I was making ends meet and making it happen. And I was getting the same questions kind of repeatedly, like, oh, hey, how do you do this? How do you do that? So that's where the idea for making a whole blog about it came out.
So as many of our guests may remember, Dave Peters was on our show during season 1, and he told us about how he started life in a 370Z Nissan. But Dave, how did you end up in the Miata again?
Mine was budget reasons as well. The 370Z it was hard on the expendables. Tires were maybe 2 weekends and they were big 19-inch 305s on the back. So full set was, I think it was about $1,500 and it was a staggered setup and brake pads went about as quick. It just wasn't a great track car. It had fuel starvation problems and overheating problems, and not of the engine, but like the clutch would overheat because the clutch line was next to the catalytic converter. But it really was more about money. I did it a couple of times and realized a couple of times a year wasn't going to be enough. And I couldn't afford to buy 3-4 sets of tires a year for the Z. And, of course, you see 50 Miatas at every event out of 100 cars sometimes. So I knew there had to be something good there. And a buddy of mine got into it and he kind of wanted to know what car to buy. And I was like, I think you want to buy a Miata. I mean, it just seems to make sense. And he did. And I still had the Z and he let me drive it once. And I was like, yeah, at first it was just kind of I can suck it up and do this and have this little horsepower thing. Once I had it on the track, and then the more I drove it on the track, the more I was just hooked on the way it felt driving it. And yeah, I never thought about the 370Z again. Probably after the first time I tracked the Miata. Well, maybe not then, because it broke down the first time I took it out, and I think I got 3 laps in a weekend. But that was my own dumb mistake, that happened. So yeah, it really just boiled down to instigation was financial. Once I got in it, I really don't want anything else.
You've told me before, the more time you spent behind the wheel of the Miata is what inspired you to build hpdjunkie.com as well, because you were dying to go to more events and drive the car.
I did start the website with the 370Z, but again, I'm an honest guy, and the whole reason for the website was to get on the track more often and, kind of help the budget. Yes and no. I did have the 370Z when I started out. I probably only had it for a year before I got the Miata.
Well, we'll attribute the success of hpdjunkie.com to your Miata, not the Nissan. How about that?
That sounds fair. I can live with that.
And last but certainly not least, Bill, tell us about Late to Grid and your motorsports past.
Thanks very much for having me on. It's great to see Dave and Jim again. Yeah, so Bill Snow, host of the Late to Grid podcast, where the idea is to get people together to share stories and inspiration for grassroots motorsports and share the stories that might inspire some folks. And my motorsports background started, probably in middle school. I would get dragged to sports car races and IndyCar races with my dad, and he was a spectator and really started to enjoy that. And at one point in high school, I thought to myself, well, shoot, I could probably be doing this. So my first car was a 280ZX, and I joined the SCCA and I started autocrossing and just fell in love with it. But then after college and marriage and kids, you didn't have fun cars anymore for a while. And I got in a 76 Triumph Spitfire just to tool around in, and I had a Mini Cooper S that I got back into autocross a little bit. But there was a time when I was at a corporate meeting, and on our name tags, we had to write a little line under our name, something interesting about us. And I still remember what I wrote. I love small cars. So I always enjoyed, the AMGs and the Spitfires, things like that. The Mini Cooper, of course, being a small car. So fast forward to just a couple of years ago, one of my employees has a NA Miata. Of course, he's turbo swapping it, and it's a blue car with a red hard top. And of course, it's got these 225 sticking out. He's doing all this other stuff, and he runs in these circles. I said, listen, I'm getting the itch. If any of your friends are selling a Miata, let me know about it. Not necessarily saying I could pull the trigger, but so he comes to me a couple of days later. He says, hey, my buddy just got a Type R, and he just bought this Miata from the South. He's got Mad Dog roll bar for it. He's got Olean coilovers, stainless steel lines. He wants to sell it. I said, well, all right. So I drove it, and man, immediate smile. All those parts were still in the box. So I negotiated to buy the car, and I said, you know what? Let's work out a deal to buy all the parts too. After having it on track a couple times, I'm hooked.
So what inspired the podcast?
So the name is, like 2016, 17, and 18, we did some endurance racing. I got the race for free if I stored, transported, and wrenched on the car. I mean, there were days I was loading the car up on the day we were leaving for the track and finishing simple things like oil changes on the car. So inevitably, we were getting to the track at the last minute, getting through tech last minute, getting to grid, realizing something's wrong. Inevitably, I was always late to grid. It was my fault. So I kind of thought if, the podcast, we could kind of maybe help people not get late to grid. So what are some tips and tricks? And we had an episode where Gabe Gutierrez, who races a Mustang in NASA events, he's all about checklists. So he shared all about that. And that's how he's never late to grid.
Gabe is such a great guy. And I love his wife too, Anna. I had to say something.
No, that's great. Yeah, so it's sharing stories like that to help people realize, okay, part of it is I can do this. I can get on track. There aren't a whole lot of obstacles. It's somewhat easy to do. But the other thing is, what are the tips and tricks that people can share with us to make sure that we can get safely on track, not be late to grid, and still have a great time at the track?
We need to test your guys' Miata subject matter expertise before we really dive deep into this subject. So we have a question that needs to be answered. Inquiring minds want to know.
Is it Miata or MX-5? And what does Miata even mean?
I always say Miata, but mine, I think, was technically still called a Miata. I can't remember, but someone told me it was something middle-aged, something, but I can't remember. Maybe the guy that was on the design team has told you, and you can fill us in.
I've always heard it means reward.
Oh.
You're being rewarded for driving Miata by the driving experience. I can see that.
Yeah.
I could see that. You're not rewarded by the horsepower, though, but that's a whole other story.
No, definitely not.
I think it has some. There's
one of those names that just
German.
sounded cool.
Yeah.
I think the NA Miata actually had a Miata badge on it. It wasn't MX-5. It actually was a Miata, the Tic Tac.
But I believe it was always known internally to Mazda as the MX-5, and then it got badged as a Miata wherever that came from. We'll leave that up to our listeners to write in and let us know where this little bit of trivia comes from. As we were just joking, we hear all the time that Miatas are slow. So is this fact or fiction? And if it is fact, how do we make a Miata faster? Well, let's talk about some tips and tricks and thoughts on going faster in a low horsepower momentum vehicle.
Look, they're slow. They're always slow, and that's why they're good. Once they become fast is the problem. But the trick is to not ever slow down. Home track to me is New Jersey Motorsports Park Lightning. I always tell people, you hit the brakes twice on that entire track. And one of those is kind of a lighter braking anyway. So really the biggest trick for Miata to go fast is not to add a turbo. It's not to add power. It's just don't slow down.
Isn't that the same theory as when you're driving a go-kart?
Yeah, basically. I have a go-kart, which is much faster than my Miata, though. So
that's what I tell people all the time when we're karting. Just don't use the brakes. What?
Yeah.
So with that being said, thoughts, tips, tricks, things that people can do to take a stock Miata and make it better.
Number one, seat time. That's the only way any driver is going to get faster. I don't care if you're doing turbos, you got nitrous, you got rockets. You need seat time. That's number one. Number two is tires. So once you get some seat time and you get a feel for what your current tires feel like, you put new tires, grippier tires, stickier tires on there, you're going to get a little faster. Third, brakes. If you can go a little deeper, carry that momentum a little bit further, just touch them and have them grab quickly, my opinion, brakes. Then you can look at steering, suspension stuff. If those four things aren't putting a huge smile on your face around the track, then maybe you start bolting some stuff on. But those four things, I think, will make you faster and let you have a lot more fun around the track.
I thought you were going to say maybe find a new hobby if those aren't working.
Other sports beckon, right? But you actually bring up a really good point, Bill. When you get to that part of the equation and you're in a Miata and you want to go faster and you start bolting things on, is it really worth bolting them on? Or do you do like Jim said and kind of just walk away and maybe buy a different car?
I got some advice when I had the Mini Cooper. I wanted to do some bolt-ons because the track where I was going, man, I'm really struggling with this one turn. And man, if I could have the supercharger sort of give me a little bit more power more quickly, I can get off that turn faster and have a little bit more. He said, you're thinking about this all wrong. You have to get more seat time. You have to drive more. You'll get faster. You don't need bolt-on parts. So what did I do? I ordered all the parts and bolted them on. And it wasn't until years later I realized, you know what, he was right. It is about seat time. If you're not getting faster, not having fun with the basics, especially with a car like a Miata, then maybe this isn't for you.
There's always the Lotus philosophy, add lightness.
Simplify and add lightness.
And I'm victim of adding power, but I didn't do it at the beginning, and it's not boost. It's just more air through. It's not a huge gain, but Eric, you were still faster than me. You had a little more horsepower.
And my car was how much heavier than yours? I'm just saying.
I don't know, but you did have slicks on.
All right.
Used slicks though. Used slicks.
True.
I want to call it even. And I think you had a little more power. You were gaining like, I don't know, 6 to 10 feet a lap on me.
It was fun though. That was
And
a good run at Carolina.
It was a fun run.
One thing also that I found for really making a Miata more fun if you're struggling with the power is go racing with one. Or even if you're not going racing, find somebody to really do a session with. I personally got to a point where I was starting to burn out a little bit. I was looking at Mustangs again. I'm like, I want something with more power. And then I got fresh tires and two of my friends started showing up with the same car. And just us driving together was like the total refresh that I needed. Like, this is so much fun. Who cares? We're pointing by Corvettes in the straightaways. We are door to door in the corners, and it's a blast.
You just reinforced that misery loves company, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I've heard that, and it's true. I've run some Miatas myself. We had an SSM here at GTM for many years, and it's one of those things that it's not that fun when you're the only one at a DE and you've got bruises on your left arm because you're given a point by constantly, especially a place like DIR and the Glen and things like that. But when it's you and 40 of your best friends that all make 105 wheel horsepower, it's a whole different ball game, right? It's to Bill's point, they're micro cars, and it's like NASCAR on a small scale, right? You're all there together, bump drafting. And since you've raced, Jim, that brings up a good point. We'll talk about everybody's experience on track with the Miata, but I've heard it said before that a lot of the Miata races are nose to tail, waiting for somebody to screw up. And if you do stick your nose out at the wrong time, you get sent to the back of the pack because there's no way to get back in.
Yeah. That's really it. I mean, especially on bigger tracks, if you watch some of the videos from Daytona, where NASA Champs was last year, that actually even more so at Daytona when the global MX-5 Cup cars were there. So they've got a little bit more power, but they still drive just like ours. The last lap of one of those races was 3 wide, and it wasn't 3 cars, it was 3 lanes wide. No, not that one actually, but that was wild too.
That one that was same way.
Yeah. Well, no, but this was 3 lanes wide. And the leading car went from first place to, God, I think he finished 7th in one corner. He just got freight trained by 2 other lanes and it was just like, oh, oops. It's an extra level of chess that you have to have beyond driving.
I'm sorry, I mistook it for the Sebring race because it was pretty much the same ending. Last corner, I think whoever was in 3rd came out of the corner in 1st and ended up crossing the line in 3rd.
Yeah. Oh, that was a great
It was
finish.
Milliseconds between the 3 cars. It was amazing.
In spec racing, there's a lot of still 1.6s out there, a mixture of 1.8s. You don't see too many NC or ND 3rd and 4th gen Miatas. Every once in a while, an NC with a penalty and things like that. Why is everybody still sticking with the older cars? Are they really the best, and especially for the racing, or is the spec classes just designed around the NA and the NBs?
Yeah, well, spec Miata is only NA and B, actually. You can't run the NCs or NDs in our class. There's a lot of noise, I'll say, coming up now about SMX, which is the NC cars. There's a traveling race that's going to be happening this year. It was supposed to happen about 2 years ago, but, COVID. So we'll really see this summer how those cars take off. And if they do, to me, it's not the same car. It doesn't have the same magic as ours. It's very similar, but there's not nearly as many, so they won't ever be as cheap. Parts won't be as plentiful. I hope the racing will be just as good because our cars are getting older and older by the minute. They have their own playgrounds.
Because there's other spec series out there, spec E36, spec E46, spec Boxster, spec 944, things like that. So there's other spec races for people that don't want a Miata, that are still interested in doing that kind of racing. But those classes are some of the fastest, most grueling racing out there, to Dave's point. Let's talk about some of your experiences with Miatas on track, and maybe if they're not, they're all right, but maybe some of your biggest oops moments, maybe those learning moments, something that the Miata taught you as a driver, something you still carry with you today.
The first oops moment came at a track day I had with the Miata. I pointed by a C8, ducked in right behind him. So this track day was supposed to be filtered for people that had previous track experience. So if you had previous track experience, you could bring anything you wanted to, except for race car. A bunch of guys came out with C8s. They just bought them. Point them by. I duck in behind him because now we're at the end of a straightaway and he slams on the brakes. The nimbleness of the Miata right out of the way. I have it on GoPro. I'm hesitant to post it because I don't want to stir anything up with the C8 driver. But I thought, oh my gosh, just the horsepower difference between the two cars. The handling of the Miata was just great, though. And then I realized, you know what? We're going to back off a little bit. We'll throw a lap away, put some distance the next time around. But those C8 guys got to talking to at lunch. So we didn't have any issues in the afternoon. Well, yeah, I guess one other quick thing that the Miata's taught me about, it's trying to find the limits a little bit and, getting a feel for that. And it's what I found about the Miata is you get such a great seat feel, and you can start to feel when things are going to start to break loose or give away just a little bit, and you can dial it back and try it a little bit further. That's true with a lot of cars, but I feel with the Miata, for whatever reason, maybe it fits me a little bit better. You just get a good feel for yourself in the track.
Do you find that it translates to other cars, or do you feel that you have to relearn if you take another car on track or to a motorsport event?
If you're moving to a front wheel drive, there's a little bit more adaptation to that, but other rear wheels, for me, it feels similar. We used to race an E30. I feel like the handling is, I won't say similar, but the feedback seems similar to me between the two.
We call that fun wheel drive, by the way. It is a totally different driving style than you guys are
I like that,
accustomed to.
fun wheel drive. Yeah.
That's not the one I heard. There's another one that I heard.
You must be referring to the 911 drivers. That they're, the front wheel drives going backwards. Yeah, those guys.
I mean, I can say that I definitely think it made me a better driver than if I'd have kept driving the 370Z. And kind of to what Bill's saying is, I think what it is that makes it magical is the balance front to back. It gathers up super easy. You start feeling the ass end come around, and then a little flick of the wheel and it comes right back under you. I can't really speak for driving other stuff except the Z. Honestly, I think I've just driven another Miata on the track, a couple other Miatas on the track. I've never driven anything else. So
never lift really is a big one. As you progress to get faster and faster in a Miata, it's easy to drive a Miata decently because of the low speed. But if you really want to go fast, you need to be on the limit all the time.
Full send
all the time. I mean, I've got some clips. I keep on putting up clips of mostly turn one at NJ Motorsports Park, just sideways, hold the gas, and like, oh, you're good. Just steer through it and keep your foot planted. And that's translated pretty well to other cars. I got to drive an E30 at Lime Rock last year, which was really exciting to not have a dry session until the race started at a track like Lime Rock, if you're familiar. But I looped it in my first wet practice session. But, you have to find the limit. So you have to cross it to find it. Things translate, but those cars like to move around on the tail a lot quicker than mine does. So,
I feel like all the paddock jokes suddenly come out when you say that. Like, what's it like to drive a car with torque, compared to your Miata?
I was afraid. I was like, this car feels like it's got so much power. And, maybe it had 30 more horsepower than my Miata, but also 300 more pounds. But it was fun.
Bill sort of alluded to something that I want to touch on that comes up at every driver's meeting, especially as a coach. You hear it all the time, students complaining, this and that. What are your pet peeves as a Miata driver on track? What really gets you hot and boiled?
Corvette guys.
The C8 brake check.
It seems to happen to me every time I'm at VIR. You chase them from turn one to Oak Tree, and they should point you by, and they don't. And then you kind of catch them going down roller coaster onto the front straight. They probably shouldn't point you there, but you're right back on them in turn one. And I can remember once probably doing 6 laps behind the same Corvette. I was so frustrated. I didn't go pull in for extra space. I just pulled in and stayed in.
The pet peeve is the faster car that rides you. You give them the point by, they pass you, and then you're right on their bumper in the turns. I think we talked about this earlier or something like that. You chase them through a couple turns, they're way ahead, and you catch them in a couple of turns. Yeah, just because they have 5 times more horsepower doesn't mean they're necessarily all that faster on the track.
I think it boils down to egos, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to let the 120 to whatever horsepower Miata get by their 500 horsepower, whatever. I shouldn't have singled out Corvette guys, because it's not just Corvette guys. It was just easy to say after.
Oh, no, it's the Mustang guys and the Porsche guys and the Viper guys, and you can anybody
with more power than Miata.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, and I'll preface this by saying I've never actually done it, but I have very much tried in advanced DE groups to push cars out of corners. They drive off before I can actually push their bumper, but I've tried. I've gotten close. There's a 911 where if there was air between our bumpers, I'd be shocked. You got away from me.
That is the good side of it, is freaking out the guys with the $100,000 to $200,000 car by being on their ass.
Yeah.
That usually will get you the point by too.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, the thing that I learned that helps is the next corner, instead of being in their mirror following them, be in their mirror sideways. And then usually you'll get a very quick point by because
or a black flag, one or the other. I mean,
it depends.
Yeah.
Just pass them in the dirt.
Punch Stuck style. And to your point, I feel your guys' pain. I run a low horsepower car as well, and it's a lot heavier than Dave's, that's for sure. But yeah, you're there, you're glued to somebody. You're like, oh my god. And being an instructor, I tell my groups, especially if I'm a group leader, I'm like, hey guys, these Miata guys, they didn't transport themselves here. They are on you, and their foot is to the floor. Like, get out of the way. You know what I mean? Be respectful of it and whatnot. And a lot of people don't respect the momentum cars and how much work it takes to drive one because we don't have the horsepower. We don't have 5, 6, 7, 800 horsepower on demand like some of these Camaros and Corvettes and Vipers and whatnot. So it is a struggle. The struggle is real, but I always like to remind people to be respectful. And you know what else? Tuck behind the Miata because they are hauling ass and you might learn something. That's the other thing I try to remind people. Follow their line, see what they're doing, see how you can carry more speed because that low horsepower momentum car is going to demonstrate that very, very quickly.
I've actually gotten I've given point buys the fast cars coming up on straights and they wave it off and they'll follow me for 2 or 3 laps and then they'll present and go the next straightaway. And it's pretty cool that they're trying that. The one thing that I have noticed, if you are in a Miata and you're tired of not getting point buys, make your car look like a race car, like sticker it up. Because since I've been in the spec Miata, people let me right by. I mean, maybe it's because my comfort level for space between cars has gotten a lot shorter, but so I'm closer than I used to be, but I haven't gotten held up much lately.
How many stickers do you have?
Oh, I can't count. There's a lot. I mean,
there better be a lot of HPDE junkie stickers.
Well, I mean, if you got
how much horsepower do they have?
Well, that's my point. If he's got like 20 stickers, that's an extra 100 horsepower. You're immediately faster.
Oh, of course.
Well,
yeah, required alone, there's quite a few. So
Dave brought up the $100,000, the $200,000 cars. We know that the Miatas, at least maybe in previous markets, not the post-COVID market, that they were cheap. At least that's what we hear all the time. So what's the true total cost of ownership really like for HPD and for club racing?
I mean, it really depends on what you want to do with it. I think you can keep it really cheap and throw some coilovers and some little wider wheel and tire and a roll bar and some racing seats and roll with it. But you can be like me and go down the rabbit hole and just do everything you possibly can to it, which a lot of it, that was part of the hobby for me too, was I didn't really wrench a whole lot on other cars. Working on the Miata, I felt really comfortable. So I just kept doing more and more. And, I liked fiddling with little fabrication things. And so it really depends. And, as far as cost, I paid, I think, $2,500 for mine. Oof. But you know what? I would think the same car now would be $6,000. And I've probably put 10 to 12,000 in it. But again, a lot of it was, not necessary just because I wanted to. And
it wasn't all in one shot either. It was over the course of years.
It was over probably 5 years. And, it could be anything from hood vents to a different shifter to things that absolutely aren't necessary. They just make it a little nicer or cooler or whatever you want to call it.
If we all look back over time and start calculating how much money we put into our cars over the years, we would all start crying.
Hey, that's verboten. We don't do that here.
No. But only if you want to be depressed.
Even still, $12,000 invested into a track car that is fun as hell is still nothing.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Comparatively, you guys can relate because you're in lesser expensive cars, but you go to a Chin event and every car there is 100,000 and up. Yeah. So,
you're nowhere near that. And you have just as much fun, if not more fun than they do.
Exactly. And there's definitely the fun of running one down and kind of laughing, thinking what you've spent versus them.
I've seen Dave's car in person. It's very nice. So good job.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
One thing that was wild was my consumable budget I think it was the 2 years before I started racing. So I was instructing, and with my club, they had a special where you could do time trial for just $50. It was like a bump up for the instructor group. There was very few people that would run in my specific class in time trial, but there was enough to get Max's contingency and Hawk contingency. So for 2 years, I didn't spend any money on tires or brakes.
Nice.
Brake pads are completely covered, and I was only going through a set a year anyway. Tires.
So that was $30, right?
Yeah, 55. I got the better one. And then the tires were given to me too. So I would run them for a year and then just replace them with contingency tires and sell off the old ones. And it worked out pretty well.
So I bought mine a little bit over 2 years ago for the car, all the stuff that he had new in box, and then a set of wheels and RE71s. I was still just under 10 grand. And the only thing I've had to do in the last 2 years is we pulled the motor over the off season here just to reseal every gasket. The rear main was leaking a little bit, the front crank a little bit. I mean, so seals and a couple of bearings and a new pulley. And I did some upgraded motor mounts and upgraded Kevlar timing belt. So I'm probably right where Dave is, probably 12 grand total.
The Miatas, they all come in different colors and flavors like Skittles, right? So, but there's like a base setup. A lot of people say, I run the SSM package, whatever that means. It means something to you guys. But
I don't know what it means.
But I guess the question is like, how similar or dissimilar are your guys' three Miatas, which are, all NA and B series cars? What's the setup like? What kind of parts would you recommend other people buy? And where are you getting them from? Like, where's the best place to source this stuff?
So mine is a spec Miata. I have to run what I'm told to run. I don't have a choice in it, which I'm fine with. The current setup, about 3 years ago, we switched to Penske shocks. And when I say that, I see their eyes open. They're like, it's a spec class. They're so expensive. They're actually not. They're $200 each for the shock. The total shock to buy them the first time with the mounts and everything is like $1,200. And then the full suspension package, I want to say, including the shocks, is like $2,500 or so. And it is absolutely not the best possible suspension for Miatas. There's better options out there, but the cost is really low. I mean, that's what some people are paying for shocks on BMWs. So the cost for the suspension package is low. And the good thing about the spec Miata package, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of them running. So if you're at a track day and you're like, hey, my car is handling like crap, you can go talk to a spec Miata guy and say, well, what setup do you have? What's your alignment? What's this and that? I mean, it's not going to be the same if you're on street tires versus Toyos or Hoosiers, but you'll be able to have that kind of baseline of knowledge. It's really helpful. If someone asked me what to buy right now, what I would say is try and find an old spec Miata suspension. Most of us took ours off. We had the Bilsteins were the old style. Most of us replaced it with the Penske's, and you can get the Bilsteins for so cheap. You still have to pay for the mounts and the springs and all that. But really, to get a very, very competent track suspension for very, very little money, you can't beat it.
Yeah, I think the best advice is what Jim said. You talk to other owners, you walk the paddock at a track day and, hey, what do you run? And you look like you're handling pretty well, or what advice do you have here? Forums can be good and bad. When I've asked for advice, I've mentioned one of my employees has a Miata. So, he's been good to say, hey, run this, run that. A bunch of the parts we just bought, we went to Fab 9 and X5 for a lot of that, but I've heard good things about flying Miata as well.
Being track day, I think it's definitely a whole different ballgame than what Jim's doing. Bill kind of said it at the beginning, start out with tires. I kind of think brakes are probably the first thing over tires, but they're kind of right there together too. Is going to make the biggest difference. Again, it's such a different market between racing and track day. You can kind of do what you want or what you can afford or what you're able to do yourself. And as far as parts, man, I'm kind of all over the place. I mean, I buy some stuff from Rock Auto. I buy a lot of stuff from a spec Miata guy. I can't remember exactly where he is. Somewhere in the central part of the country. It's
Advanced
Auto Sports. Yeah. I mean, the way I look at it with him is he might only sell one wheel hub type, brand or one brake master cylinder brand, but I feel like he's probably figured out which one's the best. And his prices are amazingly good. I got a clutch, the hydraulic part rebuild kit, and I think the master cylinder, stainless steel line, and slave cylinder altogether was less than $100. So, he's definitely been a go-to for me. I bought some stuff from Flying Miata. To me, they're a little more of a street car site. Not fully, but to me, that's the feel I get, that they cater a little more to that.
Agree.
So what's your setup like, Dave? What suspension are you running on your Miata?
I have a coilover suspension. It's nothing crazy. I would call it an inexpensive, it's a VMAX is what I have. And they have several different levels, and I have the VMAX Extreme Track Pack and actually got those from Flying Miata. And at the time, and I think you still can, if you buy coilovers and their sway bars at the same time, you get a considerable discount. they're probably in the $1,200 to $1,300 range at this point with the sway bar. I want to say I paid nine something, but that's been 5 years ago. And honestly, I'd like to be able to speak on, is there a huge difference between a $1,000 coilover and I think some, Olin's I think can be almost $3,000. Bill, I think you got a lucky score behind that car with a set of Olin's. But honestly, I'd really like to drive a car with them to see, is there $2,000 worth of difference in these shocks, or am I a good enough driver to feel the difference in $2,000 worth of shocks? I don't think I am.
That's a very good point. And I think there's a fallacy a lot around some of these parts. I tell people all the time when they ask my opinion, let's say with Volkswagen stuff, I'm like, start with this and work your way up. Never build the car past your ability to drive it, because that'll get you into trouble. So yes, there is some why spend the money 3 times, but I'm also telling you, don't waste your money on these 12 things. I've already wasted my money on those. Here's 11 of them suck, and there's one of them that's good. Go start with this one, right? Go from there. So it is a progression, and a lot of people just want to go to finished product, and then the car is undrivable. And it kind of leads me into another question about the different kinds of types of Miatas. I've seen them all, right? From the track cars to the SSMs to the stance bros with like negative 12 degrees of camber and bags. And then you got the square Miatas. For a lot of people that don't know what that is, tune into our autocross episode where we talked to a Miata autocrosser where he's running like 255 square on an NB. And it's like, how is that even a thing?
But they're all had 95s.
I mean, it's insane, right? They look like steamrollers and they stick out 8 inches from the body, but they're all set up very different. But it also seems like the community is very tight and there's certain things to get and not get. My question coming out of this very long ramble is, can you build a Miata that does everything? Is there a combination that works for the track, for autocross, for the street, so you can have one car and not 3? I know you end up with 3 Miatas over time, but
I have a somewhat cheeky answer. Yes, every Miata can do all of these things. When I started doing this, I had a bone stock Miata. All it had was a front sway bar, because it was initially by the previous owner built for e-stock autocross. That was it, front sway bar. And I tracked that car for 2 years and daily drove, tracked with the occasional autocross for 2 years. And it was perfect. It was amazing. I mean, I was scraping my mirrors. It was leaning so hard in the corners, but that was good. I learned how to drive in that car. Short answer, yes, they can. Leave it stock.
So what are some of the best life hacks for Miatas? Things that you've learned, make ways to cut corners and save money and bring down the total cost of ownership?
One thing that I do that I get a lot of hard looks for is the biggest weak point on our cars is the front hubs. The more grip you have, the more likely they are to fail. It's not an if, it's a when. I'm looking right now at my shelf in the garage. I have 6 pre-packed hubs because I bring at least 3 to the track with me.
Sounds familiar.
My hack for that is buy the $25 hubs on the GMB hubs. They're junk, but they're all junk and they're all going to fail. So you might as well buy them and repack them with good grease. And then in the meantime, once you have those, keep your eyes out for cheap deals on OEM hubs that are old, off desert cars, off part out cars. If they're still good, if they don't have movement in them yet, you can still take them apart and repack them. That's my one hack because that's worked out well. I have a pile of hubs that hasn't been an issue in quite a while for me now. The other street hack was actually kind of fun. I wish I had a picture that I could hold up to the screen here, but Miatas get very hot and a lot of us take the air conditioning out, or the air conditioning is junk, or it doesn't work anymore. I took a gutter downspout, the little 90-degree turn from a gutter pipe, and attached it right after my sail window, because even when the window's open, no air gets in this car. And I had it attached there so it would take air from right behind the mirror and throw it right at me in the driver's seat. I swear it saved my life on hot days. And I'm talking street, track, whatever. It was great. All for $4.
It made me think of, I love when I can buy something for my car at Home Depot or Lowe's. I don't know. I get such a charge out of it.
One hack is something Jim brought up earlier. There's such a huge racing community and such a huge car culture around Miatas. There's always going to be a good deal on something used or a part out car. And no matter where you live, you're in the Facebook groups, there's constant, hey, I'm looking for this. And 10 people chime in with, hey, I have one, or just part out. Yeah, being able to, get stuff from the spec racing community or from the car community.
And you bring up a really good point, Bill. Where are some of the best online communities or forums for Miata owners if people are looking to get in for the first time? Obviously, if you're in the know, you're in the know, but what's some great resources for folks?
So I'm in Ohio, and there's a couple of good Facebook groups, Miata Owners of Ohio. To me, the Facebook groups are a little bit better than the forums these days. It's more real time. Sometimes I think it's easier to search wherever you are. Do a couple of searches for some Facebook groups that are Miata focused and geography focused.
I don't know if I'd call it a hack, but there's a myth about brake rotors that you need slotted or drilled or whatever. Don't spend a bunch of money on your brake rotors for a Miata. Rock Auto, $80 for all four, shipped to your door. That's all you need. It kills me when I hear someone say, "Yeah, I'm going to go get the big brake package," and I'm like, "Please don't do it."
You know, your stock brakes become the big brake package when you take 500 pounds out of the car.
Absolutely. If anything, upgrade to the. I have the sport brakes on mine, which are a little bit more brake than what Jim probably has on his car. But I mean, they're more than enough.
What is this? I thought Miata owners didn't have brakes. They never use them. What's the point of putting money into them?
We use them
When
very
a Corvette's
briefly.
in front of us, we have to
You
read.
It's
use
an
the Corvette
emergency
as your
thing.
brakes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what good are brakes? All they do is slow you down after all.
Exactly.
I mean, whatever. You know, as Miata owners, longtime Miata owners now, in some cases, what's the best and worst parts outside of the driving experience? It can be either or. So what are the best or worst parts about owning a Miata now that you know?
I can't honestly think of anything bad. I mean, I'm sure there is. The best is just, it's so fun to drive. It's cheap. Everything's cheap for it and plentiful. And I guess the downside is they are getting more expensive if you want to get into a Miata. Price has definitely gone nuts.
My call for the best part is I wouldn't be able to afford doing this if I didn't have a Miata. I don't know if there's any car that I can get a consumable budget this low and a parts budget this low. The worst part is that coming out of every tight corner, I can't just drop my foot and go completely sideways and be a hero. Like I really want that on like a DE day, if going for a ride, or if there's, look around, there's nobody on track and you want to have fun. I do wish I had a car that could do that, but the trade-off to me is still not worth it. Not happening.
The best part, always fun to drive, always puts a smile on your face, no matter what. And there's always people that want to talk to you about your car. You'll be pumping gas, but, I remember I had a Miata, or, so-and-so had a Miata. Is that your girlfriend's Miata? All those sort of things.
It is.
Did you just come from the haircuttery? Yeah, all the jokes.
But the worst part is it kind of goes in line with what Jim just said. You'll be on the freeway, and I'm not advocating for street racing or saying this would be street racing, but you're on the freeway and, a Charger, Challenger, or an STI rolls up next to you, and you're like, man, I want to play a little bit. And you can't hang with them if they drive you.
I want to do some MythBusters, but it's probably directed more at Jim. So in a lot of these racing series, there is a conspiracy theory that in order to be competitive and to win, all the front guys they're spending a lot more money than the people at the back of the pack. Is it the same for the SM and SSM guys? Is that part of the game? You're Mr. No Money Motorsports. Are you competitive racing, and are the front runners putting in more money than the back markers?
Bradley, are you referring to this mythical 1.7 liter Miata that doesn't exist anywhere?
I would like to invoke my Fifth Amendment rights.
That is the best question. That is not just a good question. That is the best question. That's kind of been my own personal journey. This is my 5th season racing now. I've always been doing it very cheaply, but each year I kind of ramp it up a little bit more, or prep, or what I'm doing. Last season, we averaged 19 cars a race, and I ended the season in, is it either 4th or maybe 5th for points. I didn't win any races yet. I had, I think, a couple thirds this year and a lot in the top 5, top 6, which kind of stinks. It was a lot of 6s because that's right out of Toyo Bucks. But I was able to stay right up there in the front of the pack on the engine that came in my car when I bought it 6 years ago. 1 set of sticker tires per season, doing alignments basically myself. My friend David TNZ Auto did my alignment like 2 years ago, and that's the last shop alignment I had. If you spend more money and more prep on these cars, you will be able to go faster. But having the spec series, the spec rules, and the prep, you get a lot less advantage spending more money in spec Miata than you would if you're spending money in an open class like an ST class or an unlimited class. So it still makes a difference, but not nearly as much as anywhere else. We are at Watkins Glen in like 3 weeks for our first race of the season, and I just bought a new used engine. So ask me this question again at the end of the month. Now that I'm making power that should be right up with the top boys and girls, we'll see how I can hold up. We'll see if that extra 10 horsepower is worth the money.
What's the displacement of that motor? Did you say?
It's, I believe it's 1.9 liters now.
Okay.
It is actually an overbore, 1.81, and I have to take a 15-pound weight penalty, which is good because I already did that with COVID and how I learned how to bake bread. So I've been preparing for this.
Congratulations on being like right in there with the top guys. It's pretty admirable. In 5 years racing, it's really good. It's an alternate universe. The Miata, the MX-5 does not exist. What do you drive? Everything else being equal, what is your track weapon, your race weapon?
Oh, that's a really good question, Brad.
I'd probably go E30, E36. I've only tracked an E36, but we raced an E30. I really enjoyed it. Plus, although the E30 pricing is going through the roof like everything else in parts, but E36 or even the E46, they're everywhere. Parts are available everywhere. They're somewhat reliable. So that's what I would go with.
I like how you emphasize somewhat. That's good.
Yes.
They're reliable.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what really makes me curious for some reason is the BRZ FRS Toyota 86. I have driven one on the street. My dad had one for a little while, and it was a nice driving car, but that was prior to me ever driving on the track. So I don't feel like I really drove it. I'm very curious about those cars. So that might be my choice.
I have a 2-part answer here. So for racing, it would be E30. Got to race a spec E30. It was a blast. I didn't rush to sell my Miata after doing it, but they're a lot of fun. In my opinion, they're more fun to drive. They're slightly less fun to race, if that makes sense, just because the handling characteristics.
Makes none at all.
Yeah, right. But if for tracking, the 86 cars all the way. The BRZ FRS, the 86, I mean, that to me is about as close as you're going to get to a modern Miata. I know they still make Miatas. Their formula is a little bit better, in my opinion. I mean, to not have to worry about a roll bar that you can't even really easily put in a new Miata, the glass transmissions that they put in the new Miatas. Right now, I'm leaning towards the 86 cars. Plus, there's so many that they're selling. That might be our next big spec class.
Do I get a vote, Brad? Can I throw one in?
You cannot say E36.
It's definitely not going to be a BMW. That's for sure. I'm gonna stick to my roots. And
GTI.
I would say, no. I would say 944 for the previous reasons stated, 50 to 50 weight distribution, the whole 9 yards, and they're quicker than an E30 technically. So I think I would go with the 944.
See,
I could see that being an option.
Every time that I've seen one on track, I mean, there was a 2-year spread where every time one showed up for our race group, I was like, when's the red flag going to happen?
That's how we feel about Miatas
terrible
around
joke because
here.
it was like, he's out of the car, but it's on fire, and there it is. It's parked over here. It's just like, man.
To dovetail off of what Brad said and bring it back into reality a little bit, if you had to start all over again, would you stick with the Miata you have, or would you do something different?
I want pop-up headlights.
I definitely would not do anything different. Obviously didn't know then what I know now, but I think I made the right choice.
I would do the same exact thing. Street Miata for a while, then spec Miata when I can. 2
of you having NBs and 1 of you having an NA, I have to ask the question, are those the best generations, the original 2? Do you have any love for the NC and the ND? If not, why not? Let's talk about the newer ones as well. Nobody seems to really focus on them.
I'd like to drive both. I've ridden in an ND on the track, and it seemed pretty cool, but driving and riding is 2 different things. And I don't even think I've been in an NC on the street, but I'd be very, very curious to drive both.
I do like the NA and NB styling. I know the NC isn't too much different. Some people say, I just don't necessarily like the lines of the NC or ND. Not saying anything negative about them. But the one thing is I'm a fan of simplicity. And the more complicated a car gets, the more expensive it is to repair, the more things that can break. Simple to me is better.
Bill kind of nailed my why I like the NA so much. They're so simple. They're reliable. The NCs had some early engine issues. The NDs are having transmission issues. They're still great, fantastic cars. And maybe it's just me sticking with what I know. I would love to get in one. I'm not ruling them out for the future as our cars get older. We might have to start moving up sometime soon, if nothing else, just to keep up with the general speed of track days, because they both have a good amount more power. They're great cars. I would love to track them and street them, but I'm definitely not selling mine anytime soon.
I hear you on that. I've gotten the opportunity to run a couple of prepared NCs on track, and I really like them. I would choose them, honestly, because they're a little bit more comfortable, they're bigger, but the swap potential, if you've got that mentality, is huge. You could put a 2.3, a 2.5. There's a lot of power options for the NC turbos they have over in Europe, making 300 plus horsepower. I just like that chassis. And having driven the older ones as well, when I got in the NC, it was a little less twitchy because it's a bigger car, which actually leads me into my question to you guys about maybe your gut reaction to the ND, because it went smaller again, right? The NC is the largest Miata by far, but then they went backwards and they said, let's go back to the original size. So when that car debuted and you guys got to put eyes on it, what did you think? And what do you still think about it today?
I liked it. I mean, I like the way it looks. I mean, not stock right from the showroom. I think the wheels look a little funky and a little small on them, but I like the lines. And, like Jim was saying, I've thought about the NC and ND option as the future of what happens when you can't find any more NAs or NBs, or God forbid I ball mine up. Would I go that route? So yeah, I'm curious about them. Very.
The only hard stop I have for really the ND, I think, over the NC is the roll bar is so tough to put in those cars. Right now, the only solution, and I could be wrong here, but I believe the only solutions are like over $2,000 for one specific company that makes a roll bar you can go on track with, and it's not ready for that compromise yet.
What about the RC? What about the RC edition?
You have to have a roll bar in those too.
Yeah, it looks like it's a regular Targa car, but the back of the car actually lifts up to put the Targa underneath, so there's no fixed roof portion. I've recently heard that some clubs do let you on track with that. I wouldn't feel comfortable really wheeling a car like that without some sort of protection in it.
Because to your point, some clubs allow the NC2, the one with the convertible hardtop, to be run just with the factory hoops instead of a roll bar. So that's kind of interesting because the NC1 and NC2, soft top to hard top, all that kind of thing.
A friend of mine just bought a ND, what do they call them, RF?
Yep.
And he bought it specifically to track it. And evidently when you put a roll bar in one of those, the top never goes down again. You have to actually, disconnect it. It is what it is. It's track car.
Why spend the extra money for the fixed roof when now you can?
Honestly,
it looks so good though.
He did have, I think there was something that the chassis is better, or it handles better, or there was a reason. And honestly, I know what it was. If he bought a soft top, he wanted to put a hard top on it, and the hard tops for them are like insanely expensive. He kind of did the math and figured out that, I might as well just buy an RF and go that route.
Yeah, I was glad to see that it came back to closer to the original size. If you look at the Mini Coopers lately, if you took, an R50, R53 when they came back in the early 2000s and looked at where they are today, they've gotten fatter.
The Maxi, that's what we call them around here.
I haven't been up close to one. I haven't been in one, so I can't speak to that. But I was glad to see that it kind of returned back to the original idea of, hey, it's supposed to be a small, nimble car.
So that leads into another variant of the Miata. I often call it the Fiata, and that's the Fiat 124 Abarth, which is very similar in some ways to the NC Miata. Although it shares the ND chassis, it's actually physically larger. It's more comfortable to sit in and things like that. So what do you guys think about the 124 Spider?
It's ugly.
Blasphemer.
To me, it's almost like they tried to copy an NB. Definitely lines that look like an NB, but then
especially the back. Yeah.
Yeah, but then there's some lines that just look like they're slightly out of place to me. I don't like it. But I think that it's just very minute things that they did that make me not like it.
So let me ask you this. If they rebadged it, changed the sheet metal, and brought it back as an Alfa Romeo, hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, would that change your opinion of the Fiata?
No, definitely. I mean, it's an aesthetics thing. I just don't like the way it looks. And then it's got what, a 1.4 turbo in it. One's got to be faster or drive better than the other, but I really don't know.
So I've read in the tests, and even they did a review on the Grand Tour. Richard Hammond drove one, and basically because the Fiata weighs more than the ND, but it makes more power, they're basically equal. But the difference is the tunability of the Fiata is huge, because there's people like Euro Compulsion that make turbo kits for them and things like that. You throw them on, suddenly you have 300 horsepower and you have a rocket ship, right? Mm-hmm. So I think the flexibility of the Abarth motor is great. If you want to go back to what we were talking about earlier in the episode, where it's like, I want that need for speed. I want to fulfill and satisfy that, but I don't want something that isn't a Miata, right?
To me, when I was looking at some of the pictures again before the call, kind of looks almost video game-ish. I don't know why. And a lot of the renderings I saw, I read an old article from 2016, Road and Track or Motor Trend or something, that did a comparison. And just like you said, Eric, they came out about even. I have not seen one on the road, though. Have you guys, anyone seen?
Oh, they're all over the place here. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen my town.
Not here in Cleveland.
I fell in and out of love with it, or I guess out and in. The first time I saw one in person, I was at New York Auto Show and I was not a fan. But then when I started to see them, I like it. It kind of has that old Fiat Roadster look, which is like a little bit awkward, but it works. It definitely has that look. Personally, I am not a fan of turbo cars, though. I mean, I know I'm going to have to change my opinion because everything is turning into turbos. I'd rather have the normally aspirated Miatas. And then I know the ND2 Miata, I think they bumped it, like 40 horsepower. Maybe not. There was a huge bump for the second generation of the NDs. I like them, and used car market, I'm not going to say no to one, but I'd still rather stick with the Miata version.
It's a Paisan thing. We get it. The whole
yeah. So you didn't see the guy off camera holding a cannoli saying, "You better say you like the Fiat."
Yeah, right.
As a Chrysler person too, a Mopar guy, I have to like the Fiat.
Right. Exactly. Amen to that. Amen.
I've got a lot of texts. Why are you racing Miatas when you can race that? I'm like, I can't though, but you're close.
And the price on those things has gone nuts to Brad's point earlier, used car market's going through the roof and things like that. And when you start looking at what a used 6-speed Fiata would cost, you can buy a ragged out Alpha 4C and have a mid-engine fighter jet, more power and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of this weird balance when we start talking about, again, what should I buy? How do I spend my money in today's market? When a used car from 5 years ago is 30 grand, you're like, well, do I buy, a Mach-E for 40 and it's a brand new EV and get all excited about that? Or do I buy an SSM for that price? Because a lot of SSMs, especially you want a front runner, they're expensive, right? So there's a lot of different things to consider when you get into that. That being said, since you guys are in the community, any rumors about a 5th gen Miata coming out? I mean, the ND's getting a little long in the tooth as well. It's been around now 5-6 years.
I haven't heard anything.
There was talking of an NG, wasn't there?
It's rotary powered. It's never going to happen.
Oh, yeah. If you know me, you know my opinion on rotaries, and I've hurt some feelings, but I've been very right.
I always say, if the Germans thought it was a good idea, they wouldn't have given up on it. Right? just let's take the 911 as an example.
Yeah. Well, what I've heard is that everyone that blew up, they just were driving it wrong, and it's simple tricks that you'd have. Oh wait, they just blew up.
It's a 2-stroke. Yeah, 100%. So I'm really curious to see what the future of the Miata is like. I mean, we're talking about now, it came out in 1989, although it was,
90 model year.
Yeah, as we talked to one of the folks that was on the design team for the Miata, they were developing it years earlier, right? And we joked on another episode, it's one of those cars that was designed in the 80s, came out in the 90s, and now has lasted forever. We're talking a 30-year run. And so it would be curious to see what the next decade looks like, especially as we move to EVs. Do you think there'll be an electric Miata, or is the Miata maybe on its way out?
It'll definitely be an electric version of some sort. I'm excited for it. I'm about 10 years before I can really get behind electric stuff, maybe 5 years, but I'm excited for that too. That'll be fun.
You just want the e-torque.
Yeah. Well, but the only thing is I also want to be able to do a 35-minute session at the Glen the whole way through, but we'll see.
That actually brings up a great question. Best Miata swap you've ever seen? Or one that you lust after? There's always that guy that's got that car
best.
that you want. Yeah. Well, I don't know. That's on you, right?
It's subjective, yeah.
I mean, the best Miata swap I saw was an NC that had a 2.5 in it. And, you know, I think like most track day Miata guys, you go through the like, oh, I'm going to put a turbo on it. And then, no, I've decided I'm going to supercharge it. No, I'm going to do a Ecotech swap. No, I'm going to do, and, you know, I kind of went through all that and went back to, I'm not doing any of that. Because every time I see one, they're broken.
I want to try a K swap Miata. I want to drive one because my daily driver
I'd
is a
love
K.
to drive one too, but you know, to do a K swap, it's just insanely
It's too much
expensive.
money.
We have somebody in the club that's got one.
Ah, perfect. Send it my way. Yeah, my daily is at 07 Civic. I have that K every day, and I love that engine. I just every time I'm in it and I hit VTEC, I'm like, I wish the Miata had this.
So no LS or Coyotes or 5.0.
No, it's too much.
Too much for the
It's
chassis.
way too much.
Buy a Corvette.
But you see guys doing it all the time, right? Fire breathing dragon V8 Miatas, right?
Which
Yeah,
days
do a
like
lot
they're
of
always
things that I
parked in the
don't wanna
paddock.
Yeah.
Jim, cover your ears. I have a collection of RX-7s, which will end up. Yeah, it's still a pile, and but I'm going to end up with extra rotaries. I just thought, man, love to stick a rotary in there. Why
I've seen
not?
a Miata with a rotary, and I'm trying to remember when and where it was.
I mean, it's
On the
cool.
side of the road.
No, it was a Roebling, and it did break down.
I mean, I'm not gonna argue with you, Bill. It's cool, but
Yeah.
it's sort of like other people's kids. Like, yeah, I'll play with you for a while as long as I get to give you back. You know what I mean? Like that's me and rotaries. I'm all good, man.
That sounds like one of my projects then. Yep.
Yeah. I do think though the coolest I've ever seen, and I'm sure you guys remember this one. It was out of Southern California where they put the Hellcat engine in the Miata. Dude, that
I've
thing
seen
was
that.
awesome.
Let's see. That car went into a ditch shortly after it was built, and I haven't heard anything since.
Yeah, there's no more videos about the Hellcat Miata, but it was
Yep.
cool for all of 8 seconds.
Yeah.
Wow.
We have somebody in the market for a Miata. They're 6'4" and 300 pounds. What Miata do you recommend?
You pulled this on me the first time around.
6, 4. All right, I got an NA or an NB because you can drop the floor. There's a ready-made kit. You drop the floor 2.5 inches, and you just get an aluminum seat on the floor back. Planet Miata claims they built one for a 6'8" driver.
Were his feet coming out the pop-ups or what?
Yeah, right. It really depends. 6'4" might fit depending on how your torso size.
It's the 34-inch inseam. I do not fit in an NA stock trim.
If you come to one of our events, I want you to try and say, oh yeah, not stock. There's a car or two you might fit into.
There you go, Brad. You could wear it.
NASA event.
You can wear that Miata.
The latest accessory.
My friend has one. He's got a drop floor of the seats on the floor all the way back, and he built a 8 or 9 inch steering wheel extension because it was the only way he could get his knee, the arch in his knees to fit. He's very comfortable in the car.
Drive with T-Rex arms, like
yeah, oh yeah.
So that said, Brad, I think we should do maybe some lightning round pit stop questions. What do you think?
Sure, let's go for it.
I'm gonna start with my favorite. So I'm gonna ask Bill, sexiest car of all time.
Late 60s GT40.
Oh, Dave.
You got me on this. Are you testing me? It was
The answer is not Miata. In this case,
no.
it is not.
It was Jaguar XKE hard top.
Nice. The Type E Jag.
Yeah.
Jim.
I've got it depends on my definition of sexy that day. Honestly, I always go back to my 1969.5 Super B in the green, the bright green metallic. Woof, one of these days.
Smoke hard, man. So see, that leads into the other pit stop question, a classic on this show, which is what we call the $1 Million Man question or the $1 Million Garage question. So since you started with the Super B, you have a 3-bay garage. What do you put in the other 2 bays?
Oh, all right, that's easy. 2 spec Miatas because if I have that kind of cash in the beginning, there's no way I'll make it through a weekend without crashing one of the spec Miatas. When you have a second one in the garage, you will win a lot of races knowing you have a second one in the garage.
It's called No Fear.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Dave, what do you put in the other 2 bays in your garage?
I really want a Beck Spider. That's a 550 Spider copy. I just love that car, and it's attainable. not at the moment, but I think at some point I could afford one. And then, I don't know, I probably want a late 70s, early 80s Porsche 930 or 935, something like that. When I was a kid, that was the car to me.
You guys reminded me, I totally forgot about the Alpha 4C. I think it's a fun car to see on the street. It sounds awesome. And I'm not one of these guys that's got to have a $1 million car. So throw one of those 50, 60 grand in the garage. And then again, not looking at crazy expensive, but something I would love to have is a GT 350R.
Which year though? Like our late 60s?
Oh gosh, no, newer. Sorry, yeah, good point.
And the third bay full of tires.
Right? I was going to say, well, he's got them suspended over the cars. You know, he's got a loft up there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Tires and fuel tanks.
Yep.
Ugliest car in the world, other than the Fiata.
I was going to say, I already told you. No, I don't feel that badly about it. Matador.
Oh, I haven't had anybody pull that one. That's a good.
That was the ugliest car ever. The wheels were like a foot in from the fenders, and it just had no style whatsoever.
Had that long back, two-tone, trying to be it wanted to be a Buick Riviera, but it didn't know how.
Right. But it was an AMC.
Terrible.
Yeah, one of my neighbors as a kid had one, and yeah, I just remember that being
that's 10 points to Dave for the pull on Matador.
I can't remember the model number, but it's a Hyundai. It's got a weird front nose. It's a weird rear end.
I think you're thinking of the one where they were like trying to copy a Mercedes Jag look.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know the number of it either, but those are really ugly.
That's what comes to mind for me.
Oh, it's like the Genesis G80 or something like that, the big one?
No, it wasn't a Genesis. Right? It was like 90s.
Oh, that far
the size
back.
of an Accord.
Like
I thought you were going to say like the Veloster, the funky one with the weird slope back and
that's pretty funky
exhaust
looking.
in the middle too, all that stuff.
Not that one.
Yeah, it's the Wish.com Jaguar. The Wish.com Jaguar.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It looked like you've seen some of those Chinese knockoff cars. They try. That's kind of what it looks like, a knockoff Jag. Especially when Jag went to those smaller Ford bottom and they went to those smaller Jags, but they tried to keep the same headlight look. That's what that Hyundai looked like. I know exactly the one you're talking about, Bill.
Yeah, it's a Hyundai Sonata.
Yeah.
Is it a Sonata? Maybe it was the first years of those.
Yeah, early 2000s. I just did a quick web search of ugly Hyundai, and that's what.
He had to go through 50 pages to find the one he was talking about.
That's awesome. That must be a popular Google search.
Yeah, it's still loading. Hold on, it's still loading.
He's got that AOL working.
So did Jim give us his answer, or did he go?
Yet.
Oh,
I've got so many good answers for this, but I'm going to stick, if I want to go modern, just give myself some criteria. The new WRX, what are they doing?
They're not bringing an STI.
Honda, yeah.
Each generation of that car has just gotten uglier and uglier since what? Like the 06s. The last year they look good, and it just.
But doesn't everybody say that about every Subaru that's come out? When the Bug Eye came out, they were like, "Oh, the one previous was better," and then the one came after the Bug Eye. The Bug Eye was so great. This new one's awful.
Yeah. But the 2.5 RS was a nice looking car.
Yeah.
But that was 30 years ago.
No, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it was.
I do have a two-part question. Dave might be exempt because he's already probably answered it, but any car on any racetrack.
Do I have a reset button in my life?
Sure.
Like if I do an F1 car at Monza or Spa, we'll say, like as long as I can reset when I crash at 195 miles an hour.
Yeah, this is Forza, and you can hit the rewind button.
There's my answer.
Yeah, that's what mine was on the previous Formula One car
at Monaco or Monza.
Yeah,
I don't remember which track I said, but F1 car.
I'd want one of the Mazda DPI cars at Road America.
Ooh,
nice.
Road America, nice track. Yeah, that's a good.
Yeah, that would be mine.
That's a great segue into our final Miata question, which is if you could drive your Miata on any track that isn't one of these ones you already mentioned, what's your like bucket list track to take your Miata to and go run it?
VIR Patriot course.
I've never been to Watkins Glen.
Yeah, you have to go.
So,
You got Mid-Ohio in your backyard. I'm jealous.
and I'm 35 minutes from Nelson Ledges too. So
That's great.
You only break in one turn at that track.
yeah, yeah.
Thunder Hill really has gotten like interesting to me, and I really didn't pay much attention to it till maybe last year. And part of it was seeing how many events are held there, and I was like, "There's got to be something great about this." And watched a couple videos. So I'd like to do a full like cross country tour at some point and hit a bunch of them, but that would definitely be on the list.
I'm probably going to have to say Road Atlanta. We have a little sim league that we do a lot of Road Atlanta, and that just seems like a really fun track.
It is scary.
We've done
Yeah,
it. It's
it's-
awesome. It's awesome.
Yeah.
It'll put hair on your chest. That's for sure.
Oh, yeah.
I'll call it scary.
You mature quickly as a driver at Road Atlanta. That's 100%.
Yeah.
But I would say I would drive any of y'all's Miatas at Brands Hatch. That's my vote right there.
Mm.
I need something low horsepower. So Miata would be perfect for a track like that. But on that bombshell, guys, I can't thank you enough for coming on here and sharing some of your Miata expertise with our audience and with our listeners. So if you're out there and you're looking for more information about Miatas, I think you just put Miata into the Google and tons of things will come up. But if you want more than that, you can tune into Late to Grid, which is a podcast about motorsports and getting on track. Bill Snow, our guest, interviews guys and gals who work hard all week to be weekend warriors. He also interviews professionals in the motorsports community that can help you and your racing. His audience includes members of SCCA and NASA, which is the National Auto Sports Association, and those that participate in track days, HPDE, and endurance racing. Bill's goal is to share the stories and inspiration that will continue to help grow our sport. You can search for their show on all your favorite podcatchers or on social media at Late to Grid.
Jim Tramontano created No Money Motorsports, a site with the primary goal to get folks on track as much as possible by spending as little money as possible, which is near and dear to my heart. He started autocrossing in 2007, started track days by volunteering with NASA in 2012, and moved up to HPDE ranks in his daily driver Miata. He's in his 5th year racing spec Miata with NASA Northeast, and you can check out his work over at www.nomoneymotorsports.com.
And last to grid, but certainly not least, a shout out to Dave Peters and the folks over at hpdejunkie.com for deciding that something needed to be done to promote high performance driving events, HPDEs, across the country. So he created a website with the goal of turning HPDE into a household name. And now hpdejunkie.com is the most inclusive and most current listing of HPDE track days and open track events for the United States and Canada. You can check out HPD Junkie at hpdjunkie.com or follow them on all your favorite social media platforms at HPDE Junkie. And you can chat with Dave Peters also over on Garage Riot. So we want to thank Bill, Jim, and Dave for joining us tonight on our episode, What Should I Buy? The answer is always Miata, and wish you guys all the best in the 22 and 23 season. And by the way, guys, what should we buy?
Miata.
Seat time.
Yeah.
If you like what you've heard and want to learn more about GTM, be sure to check us out on www.gtmotorsports.org. You can also find us on Instagram at Grand Touring Motorsports. Also, if you want to get involved or have suggestions for future shows, you can call or text us at 202-630-1770 or send us an email at crewchief@gtmotorsports.org. We'd love to hear from you.
Hey everybody, Crew Chief Eric here. We really hope you enjoyed this episode of Break Fix, and we wanted to remind you that GTM remains a no annual fees organization, and our goal is to continue to bring you quality episodes like this one at no charge. As a loyal listener, please consider subscribing to our Patreon for bonus and behind-the-scenes content, extra goodies, and GTM swag. For as little as $2.50 a month, you can keep our developers, writers, editors, casters, and other volunteers fed on their strict diet of Fig Newtons, gummy bears, and Monster. Consider signing up for Patreon today at www.patreon.com/GT Motorsports. And remember, without fans, supporters, and members like you, none of this would be possible.